Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, and good evening to viewers in Malaysia, and good afternoon for viewers in London. Uh, Thank you for joining us for another webinar organized by the Hasim Sani Center for Palestine Studies. And tonight we'll be discussing about the development in Palestine, focusing on ceasefire as well as the latest development uh, because of Trump's recent statement on his plan to displace the people in Gaza. So we'll be discussing these issues with two experts, Dr. Azam Tamimi, and also who is based in London, and Mr. Muslim Imran, who is based in Kuala Lumpur. Both are Palestinians. And the first half of the show, we will be talking to Dr. Azam, and the second half, we'll be talking to Mr. Muslim Imran. Briefly, many of you may be familiar with Dr. Azam. He is a British Palestinian writer and analyst and commentator. He is an academic as well as a journalist as well, and a writer, analyst. And currently, the he is the director or chief editor of the Al Hiwar Arabic satellite TV channel. Of course, he has written many books on the Middle East. The most famous is Rashid Ghanouchi, a Democrat within Islamism, and Hamas Unwritten Chapters. So without further ado, I'm going to ask Dr. Azam this question, which is it's now more than 1.5 months of ceasefire, but there have been periods of uncertainties. I want to ask you first, what do you think was the main reason why Israel agreed to the deal, to the ceasefire deal? Were they forced by Trump, or were they forced by the fierce resistance by Hamas? In other words, they were forced, they had no choice because of problems within Israel itself as well as the resistance within Hamas? Or was it because of Trump? What do you think, Dr. Azam? Sorry, please, your microphone is not on. Can you please unmute yourself?
Okay.
Okay,
It's on now.
please.
Can you hear me?
Yes. Yes,
Okay.
we can hear.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. I think it's a combination of factors. Both factors you mentioned are indeed relevant, because on the one hand, uh, we've had almost a year and a half of continuous bloodshed, genocide, um, and extermination, but the Israelis failed to achieve any of their declared objectives. Secondly, there was mounting pressure from within the Israeli families whose relatives continued to be captive in Gaza throughout that period. And thirdly, the change of the administration in Washington seemed also to play a part. Uh, but definitely it hasn't been easy, because throughout this ceasefire, uh, Netanyahu was fluctuating between the necessity of fulfilling the terms of the ceasefire agreement on the one hand, and on the second, his own desires and his own um, personal interests.
Okay. Now, if he is being forced, in other words, by factors which are not within his control, do you think, therefore, the ceasefire is going to continue? Because everybody's worried that there's going to be another war, and many people are going to be killed. Or are we going to witness um, basically a peaceful situation in Gaza in the coming months?
I think I think it's very difficult for anyone to really tell what's likely to happen. because there are several factors influencing decision making within Israel. From the point of view of the Palestinians, it's very clear. They want a ceasefire, they want an end to the war, they want an exchange of prisoners, they want to reconstruct, to rebuild Gaza, etc. But from the point of view of the Israelis, you have a right wing, an extreme right wing coalition government uh, that is bent on resuming the war, destroying Hamas if they could achieve it, and perhaps even evacuate Gaza or depopulate Gaza. But at the same time, there are other factors they have to take into consideration, including regional factors as well as international factors. So, is it likely that we will see a resumption of war? Yes, of course, it's very likely. And I think the Palestinians and the leadership of the resistance are aware of this potential.
Okay. Now, I have been reading and listening to analysis by Professor Ilan Pape, who is an expert also on Israeli politics and also on Palestine, on the Middle East. He said that the recent war is actually a phase, beginning of the fall of Zionism. In other words, we are going to witness a total destruction of Zionism in the coming months. Um, and the viciousness of the attack on Gaza, the genocide, is actually a sign that Zionism is going to be destroyed or going to end very soon. So if that's the case, especially when I was informed, I read the report that says that probably more than 10,000 Israeli soldiers were killed actually, but they trying to hide this fact from the Israeli public. So in other words, Israelis are really suffering from this war. And if that's the case, then we are going to be witnessing a gradual weakening of Israel, especially now since America is also suffering a lot of foreign problem. Israel is finding it very expensive in terms of money, in terms of cost, lives, etc., etc. So I think there's a strong reason to be optimistic that Israel is going to go down and not going to be interested in war in the coming months. Any thoughts about the fact that this is now the beginning of the end of Zionism?
I agree fully with this analysis. And anybody who has a basic knowledge of what happened to previous colonial projects will come to the same conclusion. Uh, the Zionism is another Western colonial project, and it is going through exactly the same sort of process, and now they seem to have become so arrogant, so confident in themselves that they begin to self-destruct, and this is what we are seeing. Also, the world is changing. It's not just that Zionism is failing. It's not just that the Palestinians are resilient and steadfast and are willing to pay the price for liberation, for freedom, but also the world is changing. And I see that the United States of America is changing. The United States of America is the main power in the world today that is keeping Israel alive. Trump, with his rhetoric, with his positions, is reminding us of what happened to Pharaoh and to other arrogant communities around the world, including in modern times, uh, when they become so proud of themselves, they are blinded to see that their victims are willing to put up as much resistance as it takes to be free. And well, it's almost 80 years since Israel was created in Palestine, and it was supposed to be the safest place for the Jews on the face of the earth, and it has turned to be the exact opposite. There's also a major change within Jewish communities around the world. These Jewish communities, which one day associated themselves, or many of them associated themselves with Zionism, are today saying, not in our name. And they're increasingly finding it better for the future of world Jewry to dissociate themselves from Zionism and from Israel. So all these factors coming together point to the end of Zionism. But when will this happen? Allah Alam, but it's definitely not far from our day.
Okay. Well, I'm going to ask two more questions to you, but I was informed there's an echo going on. Can you please mute your microphone while I'm asking you this question, Dr. Azam, so that the sound is better? Can you just mute for a while I ask you this question? So,
Okay, okay, I'll mute.
My next question is this statement by Trump saying that he wants to displace the Palestinians from Gaza and going to send them to Egypt and Jordan. He knows that this is not going to happen because the Gazans are willing to die. They have been killed tens and tens of thousands, almost maybe 100,000, and they are not going to move. So he knows that. We all know that. But he's talking about still talking about sending them to Gaza. Either he is crazy, he's disillusioned, or maybe he has another reason. Some people are saying that, but personally, I tend to think that he's looking for an excuse to withdraw financial aid to Egypt and Jordan because he cannot force them to agree to his plan, which he knows that they can't accept his plan anyway. So what is actually do you think is his motive? Is he really serious in talking about displacing, asking the Palestinians to completely be removed from Gaza? Okay.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, you see, Trump is an unusual phenomenon. He is an atypical politician. Uh, the way he deals with politics is like a real estate agent or a real estate businessman. And what he seems to be doing in all these projects, whether it is Ukraine or Palestine or elsewhere, is that he puts up the price so high in order for people to come and beg him to lower it and to negotiate with him and offer certain things. Clearly, he is very ignorant about the history of the region, the history of Palestine. He's ignorant about the Palestinians themselves as a people and as part of a much bigger ummah called the Islamic Ummah. Probably he doesn't know of the existence or even of an Islamic Ummah. And now he started by saying, okay, everybody in Gaza should be out, and we want to turn this into a Riviera. And now he is saying, well, I leave the matter to Netanyahu and to his government to do with Gaza what they deem appropriate. So you can see that he can easily change his rhetoric shamelessly. It doesn't bother him to change it. He's been doing this with Ukraine as well, and we don't have to go through the details, which are really well known to people now. But I think in the case of Gaza, he underestimated the impact of his offer on the region as a whole. I think some people started warning him and telling him this is likely to cause the entire region to implode or explode. It depends on how you see it. And he tried with King Abdullah of Jordan. He was trying with what he calls the General of Egypt. He rarely mentions him by name. It shows how much respect he has for him. And he found that neither country was willing to go along because his plan very simply meant the end of both regimes on the medium term. Uh, uh, Now, from the point of view of the Palestinians, they took it as a joke that this guy is ignorant, he hasn't read history, he doesn't know what he is talking about, and he seems to be oblivious about the fact that Netanyahu had been trying to do exactly this for 15 months and uh, failed miserably. Uh, so I think now that's why this explains why now Trump is talking less about that and more about something else. Even when he threatened Hamas and he said, "You either give back all the hostages, or I'm going to open the gates of hell." And nothing happened, and the gates of hell were never opened because he doesn't own hell anyway.
Okay, all right. So in other words, it's best just not to pay serious attention to what he said. Okay, that's what my impression is from your comment. Now, I want to ask the last question. Since we are coming to the end, you have another appointment in uh, in 10 minutes. My question is about the latest situation in Syria. Um, Now, when the Syrian revolution took place, HTS came into power. There were mixed reactions. Some Palestinians were very upset because they think that they are not helping the Palestinian cause, whereas some others, including you, are very optimistic that the what happened in Syria is actually good for the Palestinian cause, probably in the long run. And so, what is your latest assessment of the development in Syria, especially now? Israel has just bombed the south of Syria a couple of hours ago or earlier today. So, what is your current assessment of what's happening in Syria? Is it going to be? Some people say that this is another puppet of the West, whereas in your case, you say that no, this is actually a real people's revolution, which is going to be good for Palestine. What is your current assessment? Can you share with us?
Well, I believe that the change that happened in Syria was a domestic change, a local change, probably a little bit aided by Turkey, but had nothing to do with the West whatsoever. Some Palestinians and some Syrians, probably some others, were under the illusion that the Assad regime was part of the resistance axis. And if you believe that, you'd feel sorry that we have seen Assad collapse or his regime collapse. I didn't see the Assad regime as such. My focus has always been on the Syrian people themselves, on their revolution, and on their desire to regain their freedom and dignity. And I am confident that the process that is taking place today in Syria is the beginning of that transition. It's a transition from despotism into a regime that is truly representative of the people of Syria. Of course, that transition is not going to be without challenges. There will be challenges, there will be obstacles, and there will be attempts by various players, whether local, regional, or international, to sabotage that transition. But the Syrian people and the people who support the Syrian revolution need to be aware of this, need to be cautious, and need to do what it takes in order to protect that transition from despotism to hopefully a form of democracy that takes into consideration the, uh, uh, the identity of the Syrian people as a Muslim people, but also the human experience with the system of democracy as a system that is aimed at curtailing despotism and preventing dictatorship and corruption.
Thank you, Dr. Azam. Before you go, maybe a last question here.
Okay.
Since you are based in London, you are observing the latest development between America and Europe. There is a disagreement about Ukraine, disagreement about NATO, and also it's a bit different now. The relationship between America and under Trump compared to under Biden, the relationship between America and Europe. Are we witnessing what is it called, a breakup of the unity of Europe against the Muslim world? Are they going to be now uh, not quite organized in their plan to weaken the Muslim world, or are they pretending? Is the difference between them real or not between America and Europe as a Western bloc?
Okay, I think what is happening is quite significant. Since the Second World War, we are seeing this Western alliance uh, undergoing some change, and this is not just Trump. This is the people who also put Trump in the White House. So we're talking about slightly more than 50% of the American people who do not want to continue to work with others as partners, who prefer to work with others as masters and servants. Now, the Americans are telling the Europeans, and they're telling the rest of the world, we are not partners anymore. We have enough power to dictate to others what we want. And this is what they're doing. They want the minerals from Ukraine. They want the Europeans to pay more money into defense. Not only that, they want even the Europeans to follow suit by reducing international aid. And this is what Starmer has done. Everything that Starmer announced yesterday was to appease Trump on the eve of his own meeting with him. He's supposed to meet him tomorrow in Washington. Actually, he's traveling today there. And probably this is going to increase the cracks that we saw earlier in this European entity. Britain started that process when it decided to come out of the European Union through what is known as Brexit, and now the British want to maintain links with America despite Trump's humiliating remarks to the Europeans, and despite the fact that the Germans in particular feel offended by what Trump is doing or is saying. Now, it's too to my real problem, really, when it comes to Western relations with the Muslim world, is not with the Western governments. It used to be in the past, but now today, the real problem the Muslim world is facing is with its own governments, the governments that are in the Muslim countries who seem to serve or find themselves more in line with someone like Trump than with the interests of their own peoples, especially governments such as the Egyptian government, governments in the Gulf, the Saudis, the Emiratis, the government of Pakistan, and to a lesser extent others as well. So irrespective of what happens in Europe and what happens to the Western alliance, what really matters is what the Muslim peoples themselves do in order to free themselves from the shackles of dictatorship that sometimes disguises itself in some form of superficial democracy.
Okay, yeah, all right. So you are, in other words, you are not optimistic at all with this recent development, because recently we saw that the Arab countries seem to be not listening to Trump. They were rejecting the plan by Trump. You don't see this as a positive development. You still think that the Arab countries and OIC, they are all still subservient to the American interest?
Well, if you're referring to the Jordanians and the Egyptians, their refusal to accept the Trump plan is because it is the most detrimental to them as regimes. They're not doing it out of patriotism or out of an Islamic sentiment. They're not doing it for the peoples. So we need to be careful about that. they still want to be friends with Trump and with others in the West, but they feel that the Trump plan to depopulate Gaza is quite dangerous for their own existence.
Thank you, Dr. Azam. I think we are coming to the end. Thank you again for your analysis and for sharing your thoughts about the issue with our viewers here in Malaysia. And once again, hopefully we will be able to listen to your analysis in the future of the developments in Palestine and the Middle East. Bye bye, Dr. Azam. Assalamualaikum. Okay. Now, our second half of this program, we are going to listen to the analysis of the situation in Palestine and Middle East with Mr. Muslim Imran. A very brief introduction about Mr. Muslim to our viewers here. Muslim Imran is a Palestinian academic and activist based in Kuala Lumpur. He was born in Hebron and the occupied West Bank. But he obtained his degree in communication engineering and a master's in political science from Malaysia. He's currently finishing up his PhD, the final stages of his PhD in international relations at the University of Malaya. He has written extensively on the issues of Middle East, on Palestine, and has appeared frequently in the media to talk about the Palestinian issue. And now he is the director of the Asia Middle East Center, or AMEC. Welcome, Brother Muslim, to our event again. Thank you again for your kind willingness. So I want to basically repeat the same question that I posed to Dr. Azam to see how you see things from your perspective of what is happening in the Middle East. I want to go back to the issue of, do you think, do you share the opinion of Dr. Azam in the sense that actually Israel was forced to accept the ceasefire? This is not something which they, as a strategy for them to continue to colonize Palestine. Now they engaged in 1.5 year of war, but they lost so much. So many soldiers have died. They spent so much that they are not getting, they are not achieving their objectives, and they are imploding from within, and therefore now they are stuck. They don't have much choice, and they are on the way down. Do you have that kind of same positive perspective of what's happening in the Gaza now, or in Middle East?
Thank you very much.
Before that, because we also see that they are actually becoming very vicious in the West Bank, as if they are transferring the viciousness of Gaza to the West Bank. So in a mixed picture. So, Brother Muslim, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Professor Nazari and Hashim Science Center, for having me. I'm very glad to speak to you and to your guests. Of course, looking at the ongoing developments in Palestine, one would be very worried about the Palestinian people, especially in Gaza and the West Bank, as well as the holy shrines, the holy places in Palestine under the current Israeli administration and the current American administration. If you look at the context, at the situation in Palestine, as a historian, you will probably be optimistic. But if you look at it as a political scientist, you will be more worried. This might be one of the difficult periods, the challenging turning points for the Palestinian struggle. But in the longer context, in a more historical perspective, maybe this is one of the downs, and more developments would bring the Palestinian struggle up in the coming future. But I am certainly worried about the situation in Palestine under the administration of President Trump. He has put so much pressure on the Palestinian people in his first administration, and I don't see him doing anything good to the Palestinians in his second administration. However, his coming to power contributed to the pressure that was mounting on Netanyahu. Now, I agree that the Israeli military has come to a realization that their campaign in Gaza is just not working. Al Jazeera reported a few days ago that they estimate that 6,000 Israeli soldiers were killed in Gaza. Another independent expert that I was speaking to a few days ago told me that the number would most probably be more than 15,000 deaths in the Israeli military. So the Israeli military, early on, probably in May last year, started to come to a realization that their campaign in Gaza is very fatal. They are exposing the Israeli military to one of the supposedly weakest enemies. Of course, Israel has for many years been, getting ready to have a confrontation with Hezbollah and with Iran as well. A quick survey of the Israeli media will tell you that they are obsessed with Iran. 50, 60, or 70% of their international news are about matters related to Iran. So to be stuck in Gaza for over a year and be unable to defeat one of the supposedly weaker enemies is not good news for Israel. So the Israeli military made a lot of recommendations to its leadership to end the war or to come to a political settlement, to some sort of a political settlement many, many months ago. But it was Netanyahu that was delaying the settlement. He continued to move from one problem to another. Why is that so? We all know that Netanyahu is facing serious charges at the Israeli courts, and his coalition is very, very fragile. So to stay in power, he needs more wars. Now, Trump coming to power made a lot of rhetorical threats to Hamas and to the Palestinians, but I don't see how much that influenced things in Hamas or in Gaza, because the Palestinian resistance have seen it all under Biden. Biden was a committed Zionist. He offered Israel everything. Trump is probably, another Biden when it comes to Palestine, but except that he is thinking of his own legacy and a way out. He's probably more narcissistic than Biden. So, of course, he would like to be seen as the person who is a peacemaker, the one who should win Nobel Prize, and so on. So when Trump came to power, he applied pressure on Netanyahu. He sent his special envoy, Steve Witkoff, to the Middle East. And it's not a secret that Witkoff made it very clear to Benjamin Netanyahu that you have to reach a ceasefire. You have to come to terms in this war. Now, the same agreement that the resistance and Israel agreed on a month ago is the one that was agreed upon in May, probably May 29th, 2024. It's the same agreement that Biden was pushing for about a year ago. So Trump put some pressure. He made threats to the Palestinians, yes, but his coming was also probably an additional pressure on Netanyahu. However, this doesn't mean that he is on Netanyahu's side when it comes to Israeli domestic politics. And this is the worrying point. Trump and his team are more inclined to support the extreme right wing in Israel, the far right parties, even more than Netanyahu. So Ben-Gvir and Smotrich ideology is the one that the messianic, doomsday believer Trump and his team would like to work with. If you have a quick look at, I was flipping the pages of his plan, dubbed as the deal of the century in his first term, Peace to Prosperity, probably written by Jared Kushner and his team. If you read through, you don't see the mainstream Likud ideology. You actually see far right ideology. Yes, Likud is an extremist right wing party, but there are in Israel, within the Israeli spectrum, more extremist ideologies. Trump's plans for Palestine are actually mirroring the ideas of Ben-Gvir and Smotrich. So it is a challenging time. The Palestinians should be worried, but the Palestinian resistance has proven in about 15 months of fighting that they are strong, they are able to stand their grounds and to push back. The pressure now is not only on the Palestinians, and this is a new development, it is on all of the Arab regimes. It is on the Palestinian Authority, the PLO, it is on Jordan, on Egypt, on many other Arab countries, probably also Muslim countries. We remember Trump speaking about sending Palestinians to Indonesia a few weeks ago. This is an additional factor, an additional variable in this formula. The Palestinians have been facing hell throughout the last 15 months. So Trump coming to power will only bring more pressure to them, but it will also destabilize the region. It will put a lot of pressure on people who might not be able to withstand Trump's pressure. Governments that might not be able to stand their grounds. And you have seen the meetings that Trump held with some of the Arab leaders. It was just embarrassing. The way he treated them was very condescending, was very humiliating. So this is a new factor. This will certainly destabilize the Middle East.
Okay. You seem to take Trump very seriously, whereas some people say that Trump is actually a businessman who pose a expense, what is it called, an offer which is very high, and then later on he will bring it down. In other words, he is not really a ideological person. He is basically somebody who is willing to do a deal, and if the deal is okay, he will accept it. He's not ideological. He makes statements that seems to show that he's not realistic. In other words, some people say, Dr. Azam just now said that he is disillusioned. We should not take him seriously. He would change his mind when he finds that it's not possible to send the Gazans to Egypt and Jordan. He would just change his mind because he's a realistic businessman. He's not ideological. So, but you seem to take him very seriously, as if he really wants to change the what's happening in the Middle East. We know that the Palestinians are not going to leave Gaza, and I think he knows too. So, but you seem to think that he is indeed serious. He wants to see Gaza to be completely free of Palestinians, completely under their hands, owned by American, and change it to a Riviera. You really think that he is?
Well, I definitely take Trump's policies and statements seriously, not because he understands what the situation in the Middle East is. Some of his rhetoric might be only employed to maximize the pressure on his enemies so that he can get something out of a deal. This is, according to him, the art of the deal. However, the team that he has or set up for the Middle East are ideological fanatics who are willing to take the side of the Israeli far right in everything. Now, depopulating Gaza and the West Bank is not a fantasy in Israel. It's a policy. There are plans that the Israeli military and the Israeli establishment have drafted many years ago. One of them has surfaced in the first few days of the war. It was a plan to basically move the Palestinians out of Gaza to Sinai. There is a video, an audio recording of former Egyptian President Mubarak, in which he talks about the Israeli prime ministers offering him, to bring the Palestinians out of Gaza to Egypt. So for the Israeli establishment and for the Israeli far right, these are serious policies. Now comes a time where the leader of the superpower is willing to give this group of people what they want. Now, he probably understands that his rhetoric isn't going to work out immediately, but he is giving the Israeli extremist policies and plans some sort of so-called legitimacy. When he issued the Peace to Prosperity plan, the first deal of the century plan, he basically drafted maps, new maps, in which the Palestinians were forced out of certain areas and compensated with other territories. This is dangerous because it's setting precedent. When he forced some Arab countries to normalize with Israel, it was dangerous. Yes, probably the Sudanese normalization with Israel wouldn't cause a coup or a total change in the Muslim world, but it was a first step. What if the Saudis normalized this time? What if Indonesia normalized this time? So what Trump has done and is doing is that he's legitimizing the far-right Israeli policies, and that is very, very dangerous. We shouldn't take that lightly. Now, with particular attention to his plans for Gaza, I think Trump wants the war to end. If it can end in a way that appeases and appeals to the Israelis, he would certainly like that to happen. But if not, he is applying maximum pressure to give the Israeli side some sort of a victory. Now, there is this theory that people bring up, which deserves attention, actually, which is the smoke screen theory. The idea is that Trump's big fight is actually not in the Middle East and not in Europe. Trump's big fight is at home. He is trying to dismantle the deep state. He is trying to recreate America. He is trying to create a new republic in which the deep state, the establishment, certain liberal lobbies and liberal institutions are dismantled, sidelined, and a new white Anglo-Saxon Protestant America is created. Is he doing that? He's definitely doing that. You see Elon Musk chairing the DOGE department, which is entrusted with the task of dismantling the deep state. So dismantling US aid, for instance, is a big blow to all those liberal, quarters and institutions and lobbies in the United States. A lot of policies will come as well. So he probably is trying to get us busy in the Middle East with his rhetoric while he's doing something at home. He's probably distracting the attention of many of the leaders and influential quarters of the Zionist lobby and the Jewish lobby in America with the promises in the Middle East in order to do something at home, because of course many of his changes will come at the expense of not only the Democratic Party in general, but also certain lobbies. We all know that the minorities, including the Jewish minority in the United States, were in favor of, are traditionally in favor of the Democratic Party. So Trump, there is this theory again. Trump is employing some Zionist figures within his team to handle the Middle East, to get the Zionist lobby busy somewhere else while he is dismantling America and creating a new white Anglo-Saxon Protestant America. That is probably relatively true to some extent. However, let's remember, even though Trump is not a committed Zionist ideologically, he has been approaching this direction over the last few years. He is some sort of a reborn Christian after his failed assassination attempt. He's somehow a person who found God in his own way. But the God that he found is a God that supports ethnic cleansing in Palestine, unfortunately. So Trump is dangerous. We really have to look at him this way.
Okay, all right. I just want to follow up a bit more to really understand, because you mentioned about Elon Musk. He is head of Department of Government Efficiency, cutting down on costs, firing people. Thousands of Americans are losing their jobs because he said that they are costing the American government a lot of money. So in other words, if the American government is very concerned about money, about cutting costs, it doesn't jive with the plan of trying to be involved in the Middle East, because when you get involved in the Middle East, you are in Palestine in particular, it's going to cost a lot of money. The Israelis will be spending billions and billions, and they didn't achieve their aim. I don't think America is going to be willing to spend money, especially now he's telling America we cannot afford all these different departments. You are hiring people. If you cannot afford to hire Americans, how can you afford send money to Israel to kill babies and children? It's not acceptable. So, in other words, what the plan to carry out ethnic cleansing in Gaza is not financially viable, and he is not going to be able to sell it to the American people who are losing their jobs because he says they need to cut costs. So, how do you see this kind of conflicting
I,
situation?
I
What do you
think
think?
this contradiction is actually good. As a Palestinian, I see it positively. I view it positively because Trump now is steering the discourse when it comes to wastage, leakage in budget, foreign aid. He's saying this is wrong, which I think many in America agree with. Um, but at the same time, he's still maintaining whatever aid, special military aid that is, flowing into Israel, and an aid that is used to kill babies, practically. So this kind of contradiction is actually very, very good, and it adds to the, uh, the exposure of the American complicity in the ethnic cleansing in Gaza and in Palestine. It exposes them as hypocrites. So in the long run, this is good for the Palestinian struggle because people in the West itself, in the United States itself, will start to question the American loyalty to Israel more and more. So Trump is playing a dangerous game, which might backfire when it comes to Israel. You're cutting budget everywhere, but you're giving more money to a foreign entity. Of course, what drives him to do so is, number one, ideology. He and his team are pro, a Zionist dream of some sort. And number two, the theory that we have just discussed, the smoke screen theory, because at the same time when he was talking about unleashing hell on Gaza, he was appointing, people that would have never taken senior position before. People like Tulsi Gabbard, people who are questioning a lot of established American narratives and ideas. So what Trump is doing in the United States is unprecedented. He might end up recreating the U.S. in his own vision, or he might, lose his job midway.
Now, let's go to the Middle East countries, the Arab countries in the region, and we saw recently uh, uh, there is the kind of rejection by the Arab state to Trump's plan. Are we witnessing? In the past, we are saying that they are puppets of the Americans and the West, the Arab regimes. But now they are saying, no, we are not going to agree with your plans. So are we witnessing a transformation in terms of the Arab leaders now realizing that they have to be loyal to the Muslim society, to the Arabs, rather than always listen to the West? Or are you still pessimistic that they are still in the hands of the West, and what they are doing is simply to for their own survival rather than to for the interest of the Muslim world and the Arab world? What is your assessment of what's happening among the Arab regimes?
I do actually believe that most of the Muslim countries, and especially the Arab countries, are neo-colonial entities. They are still, the political elite in these countries are still more loyal to the interests of the Western powers than their own people. We all know that. It's not a secret. However, the past American administrations, especially the Democratic administrations of Biden and earlier Obama at certain times, still gave face to these regimes, still understood the needs of leaders of Arab countries to appear as patriotic, strong leaders before their own populations. But Trump operates differently. Trump does not care about any of this. He does not care about all of the diversity, democracy, etc. discourse. He has completely abandoned this, and he's saying this is the realpolitik. I am out to get the national interests of the United States. If the national interests of the United States collide with our declared principles of liberty, freedom, democracy, etc., we abandon our principles and we carry on. We are a utilitarian. We would like to make business. We would like to make money. Biden still did that, but in a much more subtle way, in a much smarter way. For instance, the depopulation of Gaza plan. Biden still sponsored that plan. It's not that Biden was against it. Anthony Blinken, from day one of the genocide in Gaza, toured the Arab countries one by one and started to pressure and arm twist the Arab leaders and tried to persuade them to take in Palestinians from Gaza. His plans didn't work, as Dr. Azam has just mentioned, because it's a matter of survival for almost all of the Arab regimes. You bring in a few 100,000 Palestinians, it means you have betrayed the Palestinian struggle, and you are basically, betraying your own nation. So it's a matter of regime survival. They will lose their job. And if you see the press conferences of many of these Arab leaders, they are actually saying it publicly in press conferences that this is a matter of national security. We cannot take in Palestinian refugees in big numbers. So Biden tried to push this plan, especially Anthony Blinken, who was a very committed Zionist. He came to Israel a few days after October 7 and said, upon arrival, I come here as a Jew, not as the Secretary of State of the United States. He was a very committed Zionist. He tried to sell the plans of the Israeli government and the Israeli right wing, but it didn't work. So he himself eventually in January 2024 came out in public and said, no, we are not supporting the population of Gaza, because it failed. Now, Trump is different. Trump doesn't really care what people think of him or how people will react to his policy. So Israel told him, we want ethnic cleansing and the population of Gaza. He said, okay, just do it. And he started calling Arab leaders and telling them, hello, bring in the Palestinians. So the Arab leaders were really shocked, because this kind of dealings, this kind of pressure, this kind of extortion used to happen in closed doors, not in front of media. And this is the new development. This, again, and I started with this will destabilize the Middle East. These Arab regimes are very fragile. They have real questions when it comes to their legitimacy, when it comes to their performance in terms of economic development, in terms of security, in terms of many other aspects. So the superpower coming in and pressuring these regimes is a very, very bad news for these regimes. And I personally am not a big fan, especially after going through the experience of the Arab Spring for our generation. I'm not a big fan of regime change in the Arab world. Not that I don't think Palestinian, Arab, and Muslim masses should have a better life, but I am for probably a more gradual reform and development within the Arab societies, because when foreign superpowers knock down Arab regimes, they don't necessarily hand over power to the people or to good forces. What happens is probably different. Look at Sudan, just a very good example. During the time of Omar Bashir, Sudan was still intact, was still anti-imperialist, was still anti-Western, was very pro-Palestine. When the change of regime happened, a military coup took place, then a second military coup took place, then a weak coalition came to power, then another military coup, then eventually the country broke down. During this phase, Sudan normalized with Israel. This is not like a hypothesis. It actually already happened. Sudan normalized with Israel. Another Arab regime, Morocco, for instance, because of their struggle to have control of the Sahara, they were willing to give up on the Palestinian issue, in a very unfortunate way. And who was in power back then? It was an elected Islamist political party that signed a normalization deal with Israel because the political situation was very fragile and weak. So I would like to see the Arab people live in a better condition, of course. I would like to see our societies become democracies, but I hope that this happens at a pace that doesn't allow more foreign intervention and more Western,
Okay.
influence in our societies.
Okay. We have 2 more minutes left. I want your comment or your analysis on your analysis, the latest analysis on what's happening in Syria. I know that I sense that you may have a different perception of what has happened in Syria. Dr. Azam said that those who believe that Syria was part of the axis of resistance and fighting for the cause of Palestinian, they are disillusioned. He didn't believe Assad was on the side of Palestinians. He was just pretending. And therefore, what happened in Syria, the toppling of Assad regime by HTS, by the current leaders of Syria, is a good thing, which is portends more positive scenario for Palestine in the future. And today we saw that Israel seems to be very scared of the new Syrian leaders, and they started to bomb and warning them. In other words, they are not friends. Obviously, Israel is very scared of what may happen in Syria in the future. So, what's your latest assessment? Do you still uh, last time I remember you wrote that you were not very happy with what happened in Syria, but now what do you think? Do you think there is the current Syrian leaders actually have a plan for the long-term liberation of Palestine, or you don't think they are interested? What do you think?
It's impossible to answer big questions in 1 or 2 minutes, but
Sure.
to give a very quick, view on what's happening in Syria, uh, uh, I certainly don't think Bashar was the greatest of Arab leaders. He was an awful dictator. We all know that. However, Syria's alignment in the past few decades with resistance powers facilitated the rise of the axis of resistance, the Lebanese resistance, the Palestinian resistance, and others. Now, what he committed against his people cannot be justified with resistance. You do good in one thing doesn't justify perpetrating crimes against your own people. That's definitely unjustified. However, after his removal from power, we realized that the whole Syrian nation now is becoming very vulnerable to Israeli attacks. This is not because the Syrian people do not want to defend themselves, but because Israel is taking advantage of the situation. It's a very transitional period. I really wish that the Syrian people, inshallah, will get things together and rebuild their nation very fast. But Israel is taking advantage of this situation and expanding its territories, annexing some Syrian territories, and now practically declaring war on Syria, calling for the demilitarization of 3 Syrian districts south of Damascus, bombing Syria as we speak. Last night they bombed Damascus and Dar'a and killed 4 Syrian martyrs. So the situation in Syria is very, very dangerous. My hope is that the Syrian experience will be different from the Libyan or the Yemeni or the Sudanese or the many other Arab experiences when a regime collapsed. All of those examples ended up in a protracted civil war. Now, will Syria be exceptional? I think Syria is exceptional. One reason is its location next to Israel. Syria has no choice but to fight Israel. If they try to appease Israel, Israel will get more emboldened and will advance further. This is happening in the West Bank, for instance. The administration in the West Bank is trying to be very pacifist when it comes to Israel. They're trying to negotiate their way out, but Israel continues to annex land and to force Palestinians out. You look at what's happening now in Tulkarm and Jenin as we speak, and they will continue to do so. But in Gaza and in South Lebanon, because of the fierce resistance, Israel has been unable to take an inch. So in Syria, coming back to Syria, I think the Syrian people have many priorities, definitely, but Israel confronting Israel is definitely one of these priorities. And I have faith in the Syrian people. I know they are descendants of great empires. They once ruled the world from Damascus during at least the Umayyad Empire, and they will be able to deal with the current situation. I personally have more faith in the people, not in politicians. Everywhere, I have faith in the people of the Arab world and the Muslim world more than the regimes and the political establishments. And I think the Syrian people will never allow their land to be taken by Israel or their regime to normalize with Israel. Not that I think they are going to normalize with Israel, but I think their attitude has been so pacifist and it has to change. I'm very hopeful that this will start to happen, probably because of the Israeli arrogance and the way Netanyahu has been treating them.
Okay, thank you very much. So that was a very positive, in a way, a very positive assessment. You are very hopeful that the Syrian people are going to be part of the struggle to liberate Palestine. In other words, all right. Thank you very much again to Brother Muslim Imran for sharing your analysis with us on what has happened in the Middle East and what's going to happen in the future. We hope to have you again in the future to give your analysis of what happens to help us understand the situation in Middle East and in Palestine in particular. Thank you again, Brother Muslim. Inshallah, see
Thank you, Prof. Nazari. Thank you very much. See you, inshallah.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.